Taichiblue Studios.
Here's the second part of this process. I ultimately want my want Finale to play back my the sounds, to do the playback to my my Yamaha Motif. You know, my synth sounds and my custom sounds. I really would like to hear those in most instances, rather than listening to the Garriton sounds. And so, you know, as the second part of this process, I bring my my MIDI into Finale, and this MIDI is created on the Motif. In this case, like I changed the channel 40 because I know my drums are on track 4. And I'm just going to go through this process to show how things normally start out. I normally start out with everything in a Garriton file, you know, with the Garriton files and the Garriton sounds, and I try to go through the tracks and set everything up so that it lines up with how I have the tracks set up on my Motif. So I'm going to go into Score Manager here, and we're going to pick the Garriton sounds. So you see the process that I do in going through this here. So I pick Garriton, the Finale instruments, and at this point, I'm going to lay out the staffs in the same order that the tracks are on my Motif. So on Motif, I can either record in song mode, or I'll record in pattern mode, and I'll have a track layout. So I have 16 tracks, 1 to 16, and I'll have the instruments laid out in a certain order. And so what I do here is, right off the bat, I want to put the staffs and the instruments in the same order that they're in on my Motif. They don't have to be in that same order, but it makes things a little easier. And then since this is Garriton, right off the bat, I try to just for that initial test, I try to pick instruments that are at least close to what I have in my song. And for this example, I'm using an excerpt. This excerpt, I have a couple of synth basses in here. I've got a lead guitar. I've got a analog or no, a digital synthesizer. I have a drum set, a rock drum set, and then I think I'm using a timpani on the final track. And so what I try to do right off the bat is lay out things so that they match, you know. And I'll normally give the Garriton sounds a quick run through to see what the default sounds like. But most cases I'm not happy with what the Garriton things are doing, because I'm just trying to do something a little bit different than just the raw Garriton sounds. And also, not only do I lay out the staffs and in the instruments, the instrument list, to match the track order on the Motif, I also just go right ahead and I will name the instruments what they are named on the tracks on the Motif. So these won't be standard Garriton names, and they won't be standard orchestral names. I'd rather have things line up for the instruments that I'm using in my own compositions. Like I said, one of the primary reasons I do this is because I share the lead sheets or the charts or the sheet music. A lot of times it's a communication mechanism, and I share it with other musicians. And we kind of all know what sounds we're using and what instruments we're using, and they're familiar with, when I say VCOs, they know what that's all about. After 1984, that's a certain synthesizer that we use. So that name there we're going to be familiar with. And so I go ahead and in the instrument list, I name the instruments accordingly, like how they're named on my tracks on my Motif. I'm using like rock drums, and it's also just a helps me keep the orchestration straight for the bands that I'm using. When I look at these instrument lists, that it rings a bell and helps me remember a particular song in a lot of cases without even having to look at the particular arrangement. I can just tell by the instruments what I'm looking at. So I will name the stabs or the instruments according to how they're named on my Motif. I line them up in the same way, and then I try to go ahead and give them give the Garriton a try to see what it is. And listen, I'm not bashing Garriton. Garriton is a nice solid sample library. In some cases it does fit the bill for what I'm doing, but I use a lot of custom designed sounds to get to the sound that I'm trying to get to with the overall sound with whatever band or whatever group that I'm playing with. And I really need to on playback hear those sounds back, right? So in this case, I got this little thing called Moonlight Sorta. It's just an excerpt of a song that I have, and I'm gonna have Garriton play it here. Okay, so this is a rough idea of what it sounds like. These are notes that I played in this rough orchestration, but the sound is not quite there. And also, excuse the layout of this. This is just a very rough draft. I didn't go through and fix any of the quantization, so we got some strange notes here. You can see where the percussion is out of range here with the golden notes, so that's what that's all about. I will normally clean that kind of stuff up, before I give out any kind of charts or lead sheets to any of the other musicians. I'll go through fixed quantization issues. I'll go through and put the thing in the proper key that it needs to be in. If there's any kind of translation that I need to do, or conversions, I'll make those conversions ahead of time and clean things up, right? The time signature here is off, so that would need to be cleaned up. I've got a lot of ties that I wouldn't necessarily have this notated this way. Okay, so that would be cleaned up. So kind of, I'm just bringing this example in as a rough draft to show you what the process is of how I would line things up. And here I really want to move my drums to the last position. I try to keep the timpani and the drums at the bottom here. To have that percussion be the last instruments in the score order. And so if you can see here the gold notes there at the bottom, that's when the percussion is out of range. And you can fix those in case folks don't know. You can fix those notes by under utilities. When you go to translate percussion, it will actually fix this. So I'll do another quick playthrough here. I move things around just to make sure we're okay. Yeah, see that bass is not what I really want. And the overdrive guitar doesn't quite have the overdrive and the overtones that I'm looking for. The drums are okay. The synthesizer is off, right? The bass sounds are off, so that's not quite what I want. And it's also it's in addition to it not quite being what I want. there's no real way that I can change those sounds to make them match what I want. So even if I bring up the Garaton player, the area player, I have limited editing. Like say here for the synth bass, I only have this attack and this release that I could edit, right? So if I have some kind of issue with the timbre on the bass, and I do have an issue with the timbre and an issue with the filter and a couple other of the parameters, there's no real way for me to change that, even if I bring up the area player and go right in. If I look at the Fusion drums here, look, I do have the ability to change send effects, so I can send a little more reverb. I have control over pan, but let's say I go to guitar and I look at the controls that I have under guitar. Wow, those are okay. There's a filter control there that we can use. That is portamento. There's vibrato speed, but that's not quite where I'm trying to get to. That wouldn't give me the kind of control that I would need, right? And then also the timpani doesn't have the kind of ring that I would like. And if I look at the controls under timpani, okay, I really don't have a lot of, I have a variation 1 and variation 2 that I can deal with. I don't have a lot of control there. So although the sounds are good, and they're good for certain things, if they don't match what I need them to sound like, there's really no way for me to edit those sounds. There's not enough control over the editing process in the area player for the Garaton sounds, at least. I know for other things, and if you take a listen to that, I move some things around, and it doesn't do much. I know the area player is a good player, the Garaton is a good player, and others you might have a VSL or East West Coaster, and some of these other players are a little more advanced, actually a lot more advanced than the area player. But even the very advanced players, they don't match the kind of editing that I have on my Motif. Actually, they don't match the kind of editing that you would have on most synthesizers. Synthesizers just give you far more capacity to edit, your tone, your timbre. You can edit envelopes. You can edit things right down to the tuning and the oscillator level. And like for instance here, I'm going to bring up my Motif XF editor, and notice here that these are the 6 tracks that I have, and I've got my VCOs and my 1984 synth and my Rock Stereo Kit 2, my overdrive and muted and with harmonics guitar, and notice on track 6 that I have the timpani and a sample. This editor is what would give me really full control over the sounds that I would need to edit. I click here, I've got full effects, full access to right down to the oscillator level. The control sets, I have access to the full control set. This is like the mod matrix, all of the things that would modulate the sample. I have full access to the LFOs. I have full access to the effects for each sound, and I can go in and change every aspect of the effects for a given sound or sample. Say the LFOs, if there are any arpeggiators, I can go right down to the oscillator level, changing crossfades and velocity limits. I can change all of the filters, right? So in Garaton, we kind of have like a generic filter button, but on my Motif here, I have an entire list of filters. Low pass 24, low pass 18, band pass, dual pass. I have I have 18 different filter types that I can mix and match on any of my samples, and I can apply 18 filters to my different samples. And so if there's something that's missing or doesn't quite have the right sound in the mix, I can go through and modify anything that I want. The LFOs, the EQs, that overdrive guitar. There was only 3 or 4 parameters, maybe 5 that I think that I could edit in Garaton. And when I get on my Motif, I have everything at my fingertips. So any aspect of that sound that I want to change, I can change it. I can modify it. The synth sounds, again, I just have full access. That's the nice thing about this editor and the Motif. It just really lets you, for those folks that are Motif owners, when they have to dig down deep, that Motif editor is a very handy tool, and it just gives you full access to every parameter, every aspect of the sound. We just have complete and full control over. And this is what I want Finale to play back, right? It's not only, I use Finale in several different capacities. It's not only do I use it for charts and lead sheets and tabs and sheet music just to share with the musicians. It's my basic tool. I use this as a composition tool. I use my Motif to compose and arrange in conjunction with Finale. And it's really a bi-directional thing. I do some of it on the Motif, and then when I have to do really big editing, MIDI editing and score editing or note editing or chord editing, it's just so easier to do, it's much easier and nicer to do it in the Finale environment. So I really have like a symbiotic relationship between my Finale and my Motif. And so I want the Finale to be able to play back my Motif sounds and not the Garaton sounds, unless the Garaton sounds are appropriate. And also, it just turns out that I have a Garaton library on my Motif. They make the Garaton Personal Orchestra, a version of it for the Motif, and it sounds pretty darn good. And to the extent that you're missing things, like it doesn't have all of the articulations that like the full library has, but the articulations that it doesn't have that I need, I can just play them. I can create those articulations myself, at least to my satisfaction, right? If I want to, here's an example. Like if I want to edit my 1984, my synthesizer, this is really is based off an Oberheim saw wave, right? I can go here and just change any of these waveforms for this synthesizer, right? And I could mess with the velocity limits and note limits and all aspects of the tuning, coarse, fine tuning. I got the entire attack, decay, release, a 5-6 stage envelope that I can work with here. So I just simply have full control over this sound and anything that I want to do with the sound, right? The ability to, once you have everything, the instruments all playing together, it just may sound, the instrument may sound different than you would expect it to sound once you put it with other instruments. And so you might have to change some aspects, some of the timbre, because of how it mixes with other instruments. It's very difficult to do that with Garaton and the area player. And so my synthesizer here would let me do anything right down to, user-defined LFOs to give me the exact kind of modulation and effects that I want. And I can just see my instruments together. I can see how they lay out. I can hear how they lay out. I can get the mix that I want. And this is the mix that I want to hear when I'm in Finale. And there are times that I bring my MIDI file into Finale, and I'll do a great deal of arranging and editing in Finale. And I want to bring that, all of the work that I did in Finale, I will export it back to my Motif, and I expect those changes to be precisely what they are on the Motif side of things. Okay, and so now that I have, I kind of taking you guys through what I do with the Garaton to bring it in. I'm going to show you how you would switch this over so that Garaton would be playing the Motif sounds. First, you pick the Play Finale through MIDI option under the MIDI audio menu, and notice that the device is changed to MoX8. Here I'm going to pick the Motif XF8. This is a device that I set up, and I'm going to show you how to set this part of it up in the part 3 of this video. So the first thing I do is for all my instruments, I set them all to the Motif XF8 device. And since the names, I've already named things okay, all I need to do now is associate the MIDI numbers. So each sound on the Motif has a program change number. And once I type that program change number here in the set patch to dialog, that's going to associate that sound with that number with the proper sound on the Motif, right? And so this is the important thing. Remember how we brought up the data list in part 1, this introduction to this thing. I get these numbers from the data list, and you can also get them off of the VST that we were just looking at, the editor. The numbers are right there as well. And this is what this looks like to change these to numbers that the Motif will recognize. So I changed the device, and instead of playing the acoustic audio units, we switched to the MIDI, play through MIDI. And then once I play through MIDI, I change the device to Motif. Once the device is changed to Motif, then I go through and I set all of the names to the Motif numbers. This is tedious, granted. There's a couple shortcuts around this. There's a mid name file that I could finish constructing so that Finale would recognize some of this stuff automatically for me. But I don't, typically my orchestrations aren't that big. So, I'm typing in at most usually a quartet or quintet. Sometimes I have 16 parts, and it gets to be a bit tedious. But for me, it's a small price to pay to have Finale, in order to have Finale playback exactly the sounds that I want to hear in exactly the way that I've designed them with full control. So yeah, this will take it, this is the little tedious part, it's a little data entry. And if somebody else knows an easier way to do this, drop us a message and let us know, and we'll share it with everybody that we come across. I got a few associates and friends that I've personally told how to make this connection, and I thought I would put it on YouTube so that others that need Finale to play back to their Motifs or their MoX, their MoXs, that they would have a particular method for doing that. And quite frankly, this would work for any synthesizer, actually. So if you have another synth workstation, say you have a Chord Kronos or a Roland Phantom, the Nautilus, or the Montage, or any of those synth workstations, probably any workstation where you can actually get the program change numbers and the MIDI numbers for each sound, you would probably be able to do this with. And I'm going to show you next time the actual MIDI connection and what this all looks like. And so once I have all of these sounds set up, each staff now is correctly associated with a channel. See, notice I have the channels that are numbered 1 through 6. Those channels happen to correspond with the 6 tracks on the Motif. Those 6 tracks on the Motif are also using channels 1 through 6. And so as the Finale plays back each staff, Each staff is actually associated with a channel, and now it's tied to the actual Motif sound. And when we get ready to do the playthrough, it's now playing. It will be giving us exactly what we want in terms of the Motif sound. And you can't beat this. So some people who do their editing, they may use like a DAW to play back, but here I want to play back everything through my my Motif, and it works out just fine. Now, I cleaned up a little bit. I cleaned the drums up a little bit here. I cleaned the time signature up, just to make it a little more presentable here. Now that's the sound that I'm looking for. That's the bass that I want to hear. That's the lead guitar. If you notice, the timpani has a lot more ring to it. And the synthesizer is what I want. I do a little bit of detune at the end of the song, and it gives me just the effect that I want between the guitar and the synthesizer. And that's very hard to do in the Finale Geratin player. So I'm kind of happy with this, and I hope some of this is helping you all, some folks that are running into the problem of trying to get MIDI to play back to the synthesizer from Finale. I said on the next part, I don't want to keep this too long here. On the next part, I want to really show how to set up a MIDI device and the MIDI connections in Finale, because that can be a little tedious, but it's that part you set it up one time and then you don't have to worry about it ever again. And so, I'll see you guys next time with, I guess it'll be kind of like part 3. It's not like this is an official thing or anything. I'm just trying to keep these videos as short as I can, and maybe drop some knowledge, that it took me a little while to have to figure out. So I'll see everybody next time. Thanks for watching the vid.
Thank you.